How you doing, everybody? Today I am on the French side of St. Martin on Radio St. Martin 101.5 FM. So stay tuned. We're about to do my next radio interview.
Fair and balanced, and of course I'm Jay, sitting in for the air supply as we gonna do another program today. And today we're gonna have an interesting program. We have an author, St. Martin author, if we can call him that way.
That's about right.
and of course he's going to be presenting his book. His book is entitled Fortunate Member of the Diaspora, or the Caribbean Diaspora.
Right.
And well, welcome to Radio St. Martin.
Thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and your name is Philippe?
I'm Philip Timothy Arnell, the author of Fortunate Member of a Caribbean Diaspora.
Yeah. So once we say Arnell, means that you got to be somewhere from the region here.
Man, Arnell is a signature name that goes back a lot of years, I tell you.
So tell us a little bit, which Arnell are you from?
Actually, I'm from
the French Quarter?
Actually, we're all connected, but my direct line is from Coulsac itself.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. So there's a yeah. Now I remember
that whole area back there. Yeah. That is also my region.
Okay. So you're related to the Arnells also
in French Quarter, also Grand Cause. Oh yeah.
Just to talk a little bit about that, what is your book all about? Because,
Fortunate Member of a Caribbean Diaspora. It is a history of the families of St. Martin and Anguilla that goes all the way back to the 1600s. Okay. It states facts, it has pictures, it has documents of who these people are, what they did, and what became of them. And then the literary portion has to deal with what it was like to actually make this book that I took 34 years to write. I started when I was 12 as a promise to my grandmother, and I just took it and ran with it from there.
All right. Before we go any further in your book, tell us a little bit, your family background, and Martin, especially for listeners, because they hearing maybe that American accent and wondering, which one of the Arnells is really from? And who are you related to? And what's your family line?
Okay, well, my family line starts from French Coulsac for the Arnells, and my grandfather was Manon Arnell, Gratian Emmanuel Arnell, and my father is Fabian Arnell. Now, a lot of the older folks would know who that is. When you go into Coulsac, a lot of these people are no longer with us, but one who is definitively still with us is Céline Vlon, who lives in Grand Cause. She is an Arnell direct descendant. She was the first cousin to my grandmother. And you have other people who work down by the ferry that goes over to Penelkey. You'd have Banya. You'd have, there's so many different other ones. It's too many to mention, if anything.
Okay. Now, where have you been living? You said so you're part of the diaspora also that you're talking about?
I was born in New York, and I still maintain my French citizenship, so I'm a dual citizen. I lived a few years in Guadeloupe, and I came back.
What were you doing in Guadeloupe?
Broadening my horizons, if anything.
St. Martin, living in New York, and then living a few years in Guadeloupe.
I know, it's like apples and oranges. It's just say I had a good reason to go down there, and I ran its course, and then I came back.
Okay. All right.
I'm a proud father of 6 children, ages ranging from, let's say the new birthdays. You have a 16, a 15, a 13, a 12, a 6, and a 5. And I have to go like this, wink my eye if I got it all right. I like to use the joke that I'm bad at math, but I know how to multiply.
You're bad at math. That's a good one. That's a good one.
I got a wonderful wife named Paula, and I have a good family base.
All right.
My parents are Fabian and Louise Arnell. My mother's a Barbadian American, very proud, astute woman. And my father, Fabian Arnell, he's a superhero all in his own right.
Okay. What really prompted you to write this book? You said you started at 12.
I was 12 years old, and my grandfather had just passed away. It was 1981. And so I went over to the house. I was fortunate enough to live, say, on 145th Street in Queens. Then I moved, actually my mother's parents lived on 144th Street, and my father's parents lived on 142nd. So my grandfather just passed away. I went over to the house to see my grandmother to hang out a little bit, and so we got to talking about the family, because when he died, all these relatives came out of nowhere that we never even heard of before. So this was all new to us and exciting. So she says, you know what, you should write this stuff down, keep a record of it. This way no one is forgotten.
Okay, and that's your grandmother on,
right.
On your father's side?
Right, that would be Cecile Armentine Carty of Anguilla.
Okay.
And she's kind of famous to this day because she's one of the first pioneers of the East End school system, along with her sister, Laura Josita Carty, and her husband, who was the first headmaster by the name of Othniel Saunders, and of course her brother, Ace Vioti Carty.
So she mentioned that you need to...
A very strong suggestion. So I took it to heart, and I would just keep asking questions over and over and over through the years, different people. I guess in a way I kind of started before my grandfather passed away, because I went to his room one day, and so I said, well, who's that on the wall? And he says, that's my father. And his father was actually a famous man here, Joseph Emmanuel Richardson, which is known as the father of the people. He was the secretary to the mayor's office, like a mayor of the town. He was also a court reporter. He was a lawyer. He was the harbor master that actually saved the French side of St. Martin from the threat of smallpox from spreading because he closed the harbor.
Okay.
He was also awarded a Medal of Honor in terms of agriculture because it changed the whole pattern of cultivation, and he was recognized for that specific honor.
Okay.
So.
Now, why living in the States? Is it because you were far away from St. Martin that you wanted to get closer to your family ties, or it's just only your grandmother who just
Oh no,
said,
I always had a fascination. Always had a I'm glad that she had
because
done
I
it.
know that when the further you're away from home, you get homesick. And
Right.
You see a St. Martin, you want to hug him.
Look, let me tell you a funny story. Okay, I was on the train in Manhattan a couple of years ago. And I laugh about this because I'm talking to a friend of mine who's from St. Lucia. And we're just talking about St. Martin, we're talking about Anguilla, we're talking about St. Lucia. And all of a sudden, I get off the train and this guy follows me. He was getting off the same train. A little younger than me at that time. I was in my 30s. And the guy taps me on my shoulder like this. Open palm, you hear the slap 3 times, and it like stunned me like that. And I said, wait a minute. The only people who usually tap you like that are people from French side, usually grand cars, older people.
Yeah.
And so I look around and I see this guy, and imitation is the greatest form of praise. He goes like this. He says, "You from St. Martin? Oh, you from St. Martin too? Who you for?" And I was like, "Oh boy, okay." He ended up being part of the Lamini family, which is family to me, and we indeed were cousins.
Okay.
And we spoke for a while. And when I saw something like that, I was like, wow, to be able to recognize even the tap alone, to be able to embrace the culture. I was born in New York. We visited back and forth here constantly from the time I was 13 years old up until now. I'll be 47 this year. And what I have taken from it is I knew my culture at home. In my house, you were living in St. Martin, you were living in Anguilla, you were living in Barbados. Then I had my Barbados grandparents in the next block. Then I had my father's parents, St. Martin, Anguilla, in the block after that. We went those 3 places. So the culture was heavily induced upon us.
Okay, so you really
Right.
really were living in a Caribbean environment.
Exactly, everything.
How is that? Especially having the St. Martin. Well, we know St. Martin and Anguilla can mix easily.
Right. The Barbados side?
But the Bajan side, especially even the accent.
Oh.
The singing. I
Look.
mean, I know we have a strong accent also.
Right.
But the Bajan accent is pretty tough.
Look, let me tell you what I grew
How
up
do you
with.
mix,
It's
the
weird.
fine fish and the fish that
No, you know how it is? It's like this. My mother is a Barbadian American. She's born in New York. She was heavily immersed in Barbados culture.
Okay.
For the first formative years, you're going to be more so into your mother's family, though I was into my father's family too. But most things that we learned were straight out of Barbados itself. As a matter of fact, my next book is going to be called... what is it? I have so many different ideas that it's going to come up, but the definitive name is going to be still Bajan after all these years. I grew up around some of the most incredible people who spoke by singing their words. Now, my grandmother was from one section of Barbados, known as St. Lucie, and my grandfather was across the border, St. Peter. They spoke similar but yet different. But on the average, you'll hear... Have you ever been to a Barbados wedding before?
No.
This is what it's like. It's all speeches. You'll hear, would anyone like to get up and make some speeches? And one guy will put up his hand, and he'll have a drink in his hand, or whatever it is, and he'll say, well, when I first came to New York, I was living in the Bronx, and then I moved to Brooklyn, and now I live in the Long Island Sound with the help of the Lord, and he'll go all on and on and on and on about himself, and then he'll say, oh yes, and here's to the bride and the groom. And that's exactly what I grew up listening. So I hear that, I know it instantly, and also the culture and the customs itself. Merging together with St. Martin and Anguilla, it was easy for my parents, I guess, because of the open-mindedness.
What is the common point, and what is the differences between this Caribbean culture, one a little down to the south, and here we are a little up north. Is there any differences?
There are differences in terms of mindset. I would say Barbados is more conservative. St. Martin and Anguilla are more liberal, though Barbados is British and also Anguilla is British influence. But I think because of the influence of St. Martin, there is a more open-mindedness to branch out more rather than be so centralized. I find at St. Martin and Anguilla, you'll find people who will mix and match and blend and learn different things. Barbados, they are more centralized and still get the job done and make great headway. They still have 99% literacy. That's the highest in the Caribbean itself. How they clash, for me personally, there was never a clash because when I was with the family, I was just at home. My call name has always been Timmy.
Yeah.
So it was just Timmy on this side or Timmy on that side.
Yeah.
The only clash for me was, and even in some ways now, I'm going to be 47 years old. I'm very much into the culture. I am indeed American, proud to be one, but I'm a Caribbean American. There's a difference where you are going to make sure that you carry that piece of you wherever you go. Some people say, it depends on where you are. In the States, my speech pattern is the same. They'll say, but you don't sound like you're from New York. You don't sound like you're from here, period. And so I said, well, I think it's just a blending. My father's accent is a cross between Dutch and French and some Anguillian. And my mother, okay, here's a funny story. My mother's born in Brooklyn, so she's going to have a New York accent.
Yeah.
But when you get her mad,
Boy.
and certain things that she says as well too. Yeah.
Okay. Now, you know, often we see a lot of our diaspora not coming back. A lot of our diaspora children not knowing their roots and their culture. You say you're Caribbean American, you holding on tight to your St. Martin, Anguilla, and Bajan culture.
And I teach it to my children too.
But we tend to see a lot of kids that does not, when they become or they were born in America, because when you're born in America, you automatically get a U.S. passport. You are American.
I'll tell you what the problem is with that.
And they become Americans, which is pretty good because of society that is happening today. So you have a good assimilation of the diaspora into the American culture, which is not happening in Europe. But is that good? Is that bad?
Honestly, I think it's bad because, all right, it was instilled in us. And in a strange kind of way, we're kind of a minority. And only now people are more so embracing the roots. That's why you see people going into Ancestry.com and learning about the cultures that they came from. American culture has spanned the world. It is a good thing. There are pros and cons to it. But a lot of times I blame the parents because they don't instill these things. You'll have somebody who could come from St. Martin. They never taught their kid anything whatsoever about St. Martin or Anguilla. So they don't go back. A lot of times it could be economic reasons, but we were not able to travel until I was, 13 years old. But you still had the basic concepts and knew who was who as if you were living there. Once you actually got a taste of what it was like to be there, then the dynamic changes completely. I think it's sad because there are some people in the Caribbean community and South American community who will say, oh, well, my child is here. They're an American. One time I know somebody, and the person had to be from Guyana, and so her baby had a cold or something. Oh, I got a sick Guyanese baby. Well, actually, I have a sick American baby. So I said, wait a minute. Let me ask you a question. Where are you from? And she says, I'm from Guyana. Where's your husband from? I'm from Guyana. He's from Guyana. And so I said, well, then your child is a Guyanese American. The best thing you could ever give your child is his culture and his identity. Do not strip him of that. It's wrong to do that. There are people who I've gotten into head-to-head conversation with where they said, oh, well, no, you were born here. So I said, yes, I was born here, proud to be born here. But there is a different type of Americans because it is a melting pot society. The cultures that you are born into is what you take with you.
Well,
So,
what are some of the when you mention that what are some of the disadvantages for not teaching your child?
well, the
Yes, you are Caribbean. You are your parents are from St. Martin. You need to go there. Some of them sometimes, I mean,
there
they
are
don't
major
even speak
disadvantages.
the language.
Right.
No, the culture totally disappears.
A lot of times when you're
in
the States, if you have a culture
Did that
speaks the
happen to you?
language, well, we were exposed to a lot. Here's an example. At parties that we would have or attend, you'd have a room full of people. This corner they're speaking Dutch. This corner they're speaking French. This corner they're speaking Papiamento. My father lived in Aruba for a period of time. This corner they're speaking Spanish. This corner they're speaking English. We could mix and match and blend and understand things, not so much speak, because the dominant language in America is English. Even though it's not an official language, everybody, for the most part, does speak it. The disadvantages of not teaching your children is that the culture will then be lost. They're going to blend with other people. That's great. But the whole thing about blending is to combine, not to erase. And that's one thing that I've always been bothered by. Bad enough because the way that, and I'm not speaking out against any particular group, but there are those who dominated other groups and totally wiped out their existence, where then they had to make a new subculture, which became a dominant culture. And that could be any culture. It could be African American culture, it could be Asian culture, it could be whomever. But one of the sad things is that culture is supposed to be in your system to last you throughout your life and pass on. My wife is from Guyana, so it's great that she's able to contribute to the children as well, too. And so with what I know, being in a blended society, being American born, knowing pop culture, which I'm very big on, which spans the world, and then my Caribbean side as well, too. I bled into one side itself as a whole entity.
Okay. Your book,
Yes.
let's get a little bit into your book. Tell us a little bit, what is it really? I see pictures, I see, names.
It's all facts about family. For example, my earliest relatives are in there, are my sixth great grandparents, and the the sixth great grandfather was a famous man. His name was Abraham Howell, and he was the first deputy governor of Anguilla. He was commissioned by the English government. He was an English colonialist. He was commissioned by the English government to transport a bunch of Anguillan citizens over to an area known as Crab Island. So he did that because of drought and poverty and so forth. It changed hands many times through the years, but now that island that he was the first one to settle is known as Vieques off of Puerto Rico. Then you have other historical people in there like Joseph Emmanuel Richardson, who was my father's grandfather, my great-grandfather. He was secretary to Mary's office, as I mentioned before.
Yeah.
He did so many things for the cultivation of the people itself. Now, here's a funny thing. Allegedly, he fathered 67 children.
How many?
67.
Oh, okay.
And I say
thought I
that...
heard 100.
Actually, there was another guy who fathered 140 children. I heard about that still.
So he's okay then.
He's okay.
Yeah, he's at the norm.
He did have
Those lines.
he did have an exorbitant amount of children naturally, but we have reason to believe that a lot of people he may have fostered because they went through tough times, and so they give them a sense of identity and a direction in life. And he put those people through school, which was great. So in those days, sure, he was married, had 8 children with his wife, and then the others are liaison and so forth, but still he was able to step up and be their father.
Okay, but so you say it gives histories, it gives a history of individuals?
Right, individuals as well as the families that they created, because I go through the generations of who's who.
Okay.
Whatever information I could get dating as far back,
All
at least I have a name and a date that this person did exist and that they
Okay.
do tie to you and where they were from.
So someone can find themselves in a book and find their ancestors?
Right, indirectly they'll be able to, because if they're exposed to their grandparents or their grandparents, siblings, or any elder in the family who would know this information, they can open up this book and they'll say, okay, that person belongs to me and this is how they do it. There's always somebody, especially in the St. Martin family and Anguilla family, everybody, there's that one person who knows who everybody is.
Yeah.
And that's what helps keep the glue of a family together. And the purpose of my book is to get it out to people. It doesn't matter if you're a Caribbean diaspora, you could be an Asian diaspora, whomever. Get to know your past. One thing my grandmother always said was, she said it in different ways, but the easiest way to remember it is, embrace your past to enjoy and enhance your present to fulfill your future. And it's true. And I want to make sure that the youngest child will learn this, and it'll lead them into a direction. There's a room in my parents' house in Florida, which has pictures of all these ancestors that are in this book. That's my favorite room in the house. And I have something like that I'm putting together at home, too. I go in there and I get a sense of pride, because these are people who lived through the toughest of times, and they all made it through. I am standing on the backs of these individuals to get me to where I want to go. When I feel that I'm having a tough day or something's not going right, I'll think back and I'll say, okay, this person did this person did that. I can get through this.
Okay.
So.
All right. Good way to put it.
Thank you.
Now let's talk a little bit about the St. Martin diaspora in New York.
Okay.
How is it really? how is it happening? Is there St. Martiners, a group of St. Martiners?
Oh, yeah.
I remember back in the days where they had an association, and I could remember my great aunt who lived in the United States.
They had a lot of
Also back in
associations.
They have, the St. Martin Association, but you always hear about those associations during election time.
Free advertising.
During election time. How is the St. Martin diaspora in America?
Well, it's funny. It's larger than I ever thought it was. There's a huge St. Martin community in Staten Island. There are some in
That's for
Texas.
sure, Staten
Oh, yeah,
Island.
Staten is a lot of St. Martin people. They're spread out even as far as California. They come together for weddings, funerals, the typical things. Election time.
That's what we do here too.
Right, and then you have people who are from the Anguilla diaspora, who are the St. Martin diaspora, of that diaspora, and they all blend together. And there
I
are...
think the St. Martiners and the Anguillians always come
They're
together.
the same people.
Yeah,
They're
the same
basically the same people. So same with Dominican Republic. We have so many relatives that went over there during the turn of the century for educational and professional reasons. They mixed and they matched.
Yeah.
And that's why we have such a high rate of relatives that are over there.
Yeah,
Some I know, some.
Yeah. Well, I heard that there are more St. Martiners or more Dominican St. Martiners.
Yeah, it's
than
true.
St. Martiners itself. Are
It's
St.
true,
Martin
it's
in
true.
In the Dominican Republic.
Yeah, it's true. All offsprings of those people.
Yeah, all the offspring there. Have you met some
Oh, yes.
relatives from the Dominican Republic?
Through the years.
In the United States, for example?
I have met a number of them.
Because, the Dominican community and the St. Martin community.
You think that they were separate.
Yeah.
But the thing is, they're separate in New York, where one does not know about the other, or rather one does not know about the other, but the other knows about the other. I won't say who's who.
Yeah.
But here in St. Martin is different. And Dominican Republic is different. They know because they're exposed to it. You get the normal or everyday Dominican in New York, respectively.
Yeah.
They're very proud of their culture, but many of them do not know that they have such a strong tie to St. Martin. It could be a third great grandfather or a second great grandfather. It depends. So I like to let that be known, because some people will say, well, how are we the same people? And I'll say simple. During the turn of the century, sugar cane was cut. People were sent there for school. They met people. They mixed and matched together. And so then they were like, wow, I didn't know that. So I said, check up on your history. I can fill you in on it.
Okay. Now, you have been raised with that Caribbean, those three Caribbean cultures, and also the influence of your grandparents, and I'm sure that has played a big role in you going back to your roots.
Oh, yes.
But today we see parents, stopping just at the first cousin. And
Right.
and not saying, and then they would end up and tell you, but you just buy cousins, but that's your relative, but that's your cousin, and we always, and I can remember back in those days, and I remember also, being reared by being close to my grandmother, and that, she would always tell you, this one is your relative, this one is your cousin, this is your first cousin, this is your second cousin, this is your third cousin.
I think that's important
how do
to
you
do.
see that not, because I see that part of our culture has not been transmitted, or if it's transmitted, it's transmitted, on a very small scale.
It is on a very small scale. When I was a kid, you heard whoever was your cousin. And thing is, between St. Martin and Anguilla, you're going to have multiple cousins. So that is something that I always relished and said, wow, this is great because I'm related to... Look, I have cousins in Anguilla that I'm related to literally in 16 different ways because of all the endogamy. Because that was the thing in that time. People didn't venture off, people didn't venture on. One side of the island didn't even go over to the other side of the island until a certain period of time. For me, I like to know exactly who I'm related to, because you can have people say, well, I don't count anyone after the first cousin. You better count them after the first cousin, because you may not know exactly what your connection is. And these things are help to keep a family together and keep them strong. For myself, I like to let my children know the same thing. This is who this is, and this is exactly how you are related to them. Events that we have, we gather people around, and you talk to them and say, okay, well, now that you know this, you can move forward in another direction, because your family ties are the strongest things that bind you. There are those who do not wish to be involved in family for whatever reason, and, I can respect that, but at least have a general knowledge of who you are and what you came from and where you came from.
We're going to take a short break, and of course, when we come back, we'll let you know exactly where you can get this book, and Fortunate Member of the Caribbean Diaspora by Philip Timothy Arnell. He's the author, and he's the person we're talking with. We'll be right back.
We'll be right back.